The special roundtable, the title of the roundtable is War in Ukraine and its Impact on Asia. And I just wanted to take the first 5 minutes to briefly introduce you to sort of the background to this roundtable, and also sort of the reasons why we think that it's important to do so at this conference here today. So my name's Naomichi. I'm an associate professor at the Graduate School of Public Policy at Hokkaido University here in Sapporo, Japan, of the war in this particular region. Now, as I introduced you to my colleagues, Dr. Tetsuo Uchida, he will be discussing the impact of the war in Central Asia, as he's a historian who works on Central Asia. Dr. Mihoko Kato will be discussing the impact of security in Asia. She is a political scientist, she also a specialist in international relations, reshaping the well-being beyond the cultural conflict in East Eurasia. It's a new project that has been funded by the Institute of Humanities here in Japan, as well as the UBridge unit, so Unit for War Studies research here at Hokkaido University.
Thank you, Naomi-san. My name is Tetsuo Uchida. I'm working in Japan in Nagoya University of Foreign Studies, and as Naomi-san introduced me, I'm a basically historian and historian about Soviet time, about Central Asia during Soviet time, and now I'm working upon the environmental issues like specialties about Central Asia. So I want to concentrate mainly upon Central Asian, 5 Central Asian states. And the outbreak of the war was on February 24th, and Russians caused it. This is a special military operations, but some, of course, to Kazakhstan, and Valentina Matvienko, chair of the Federal Council of Russia, her visit to Tajikistan. It was held on February 24th, on the day of the start of Russian aggression into Ukraine. And it was visit to Dushanbe was to participate in the Russian-Tajikistan Forum held by the Interparliamentary League of both countries. But I suppose that this date was fixed before the beginning of the war, but several countries, several presidents of the former Soviet Union countries, Mirziyoyev, Uzbekistan, Aliyev, Azerbaijan, and Japarov, Kyrgyzstan, and Berdimuhamed, Turkmenistan, on February 25th and 6th, especially selected that day. I said, this is my impression. And why this time? Yeah, actually, political instability in Russia's sphere of influence, which means the former Soviet Union states, these incidents became indirect push factors for Russia to proceed to make an aggression into Ukraine. This is my opinion. And for Central Asian states, almost 30% of GDP are coming from money from Russia. And at the same time, Tajikistan has serious security issues like factors of Taliban in Afghanistan. Tajikistan has been always against Taliban, and quite often occurs instabilities in eastern part of Tajikistan, Badakhshan autonomous province. And for Turkmenistan, local media, national media of Turkmenistan never mentions the war. I suppose due to the permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan. And the president changed. Berdimuhamed senior left and junior came. And the new president, Berdimuhamed, of public opinion, pro or against Russia in relation to its aggression into Ukraine due to information gaps among citizens. And as supplier states of immigrant workers, they are trying to combat the sanction from the West. This is not only and phase 4 will occur or not. This is a question. But it is unlikely now. But if Russia proceed to more into Ukraine they will
doesn't happen. But thank you very much for your presentation. I really appreciate that. Second speaker of the day is Dr. Miyoko Kato from the Hiroshima Peace Institute, and she's going to be talking about the war in Ukraine and the security in East Asia. Dr. Kato, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you very much for introducing me. And Chiba-san, thank you very much for very informative presentation. I'm Miyoko Kato from Hiroshima Peace Institute, Hiroshima City University. And my specialty is contemporary Russian foreign policy toward Asian countries. So actually, my research doesn't cover Ukraine-Russian relations. So today I will talk about how Russia's annexation of Crimea adopted in March 2014. The map below shows the outcome of the UN General Assembly resolution adopted in March this year, condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine and calling for withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine in 2022. But countries in the Middle East, South Asia, and East Asia have seen little change in their voting behavior. Rather, the number of Middle Eastern countries abstaining has expanded. So here I'd like to focus on the countries that abstained. These countries do not support Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but seek a peaceful resolution and have expressed a negative attitude towards economic sanctions against Russia. So why do so many countries take this position, especially in eastern part of it? Not only China, but also Middle East, Southeast and Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia. So as to China, as signed Russian joint statement declared February 4th this year, noted that friendship between the two states has no limits. There are no forbidden area of cooperation. So today, Russia accounts for 15% of China's oil imports and third largest supplier of natural gas in 2021. So for the past 20 years, Russia developed its relations with China to so-called Polish alliance, economic sanctions against China itself. So I think Xi Jinping administration will not provide direct military assistance to Russia, of course. And as to India, India has a unique security strategy being part of the Quad as a sea power and a strategic partnership with Russia as a land power. So despite its displeasure with Russia's disregard for international law and violation of Ukrainian sovereignty and the human rights of Ukrainian citizens, so India does not explicitly condemn the Russian Putin's regime. The first reason for this is that he supported Assad regime in Syrian war. Also in Myanmar, so for the past 20 years, Russia accounts for almost 90% of arms supply to Myanmar. Okay. So these countries cannot strongly condemn Russia in 2022. So this impact of the Ukraine war on Asia. So as fault lines in Asia. So what should we do? So in order to get Russia to stop the war, instead of insisting on maintaining order in favor of major powers and the threat of nuclear weapons. So we must adopt effective measures to stop the great powers from
a panel which is about Ukraine war and its implications in several fields. My presentation is titled, as you see in the file, the Ukrainian war and its ramifications. Speaking, that ramification came into Korea and Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Korean top policymakers, security policymakers through three channels. Those three channels are like this. The first channel is, the first route is global level route. The second route is US-Korea alliance route, and the final route, the third route is the Korean domestic politics route. Through these three routes, the Ukrainian work remotely and work in democracy on themselves and with the US. And this time, at the same time, the Ukrainian work, as Professor Khan already said, Ukrainian work put China and Russia together, very closely together. That's the structural one. In short, in sum, what this global structural reconfiguration affected, Korean policy, Korean security policy. In short, the Ukraine will accelerate the booming democracy versus autocracy dichotomy. This is structural change. This is really structural change. This was really can be said structural change. This structural change can be said to have indirectly and remotely affected the Korean security policy stance toward East Asia in one way or another. More hardline policy toward North Korea and China, more collaborative, speaking about democracy, human rights, and individual freedom. And on the domestic side, he tried to reform, police reform, try to pursue, police reform, voting reform, and immigration system reform, etc. And on the global stage, he pledged to protect human rights and political freedom, explicitly targeting, as we know, the administration presumed, putting those values on the table like as comparables in its key initiative for North Korea and seeking cooperation from China in the effort. So, 2 rounds of summit between, Kim Jong-un. I think I spoke too fast, due to the time shortage. That's about it for my presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Son. It's really great to hear from you because there's a lot that we don't really know what's going on in South Korea right now.
Okay, first I would like to apologize for the late, for being late because I got a wrong number from the ISS jet, so I wasted 20 minutes waiting for permission from the operator, and then I realized I got the wrong information. Anyway, I'm terribly sorry. Okay, I am Jajong Koo. I'm teaching European history at Daejeon University, especially Russian history and Ukrainian history. And I studied Ukrainian history through the experience of Cossacks. My specialty was the Cossack. My specialty is Cossack separatism during the Russian Revolution, especially in Cuba. The Cuban Oblast, the Cuban Krasnodarsk, the population of the Cuban Oblast, the Krasnodarsk is more than 50% Ukrainian, ethnic Ukrainian. So while studying the Cuban separatism, I studied Ukrainian language and culture, and I became involved in history. So today I'm going to present a kind of a historical perspective as a historian, So let me start. First, I would like to define the current situation as a kind of Ringbande, a German Alpine word meaning status of permanent circulation, circulating around the place with no sense of direction. By this word, I mean 2 things at the same time. First, I mean the very Russian-Ukrainian war itself. As you can see, it seems that in this war, there is no axe that satisfies both Russia and Ukraine at this moment. Both warring parties seek a solution that would be by no means unreachable. When it comes to Russia, it seems that she faces a difficult status of another mode of Ringbande, because Russia's military victory is expected to eventually achieve that Putin originally purported to obstruct through the invasion, the reunification of the Ukraine, and completion of the problematic process of the Ukrainian nation building, a process that I still believe was not complete. You know, to put it under Wilson's way, the Ukraine was an unexpected invasion. I still believe Putin's invasion will make the Ukraine more tangible entity, not only in terms of form, but also in content. Thus, even if Russia dominates the battlefield in Donbass with tactical victory, the very military success would result in a political and strategical failure. It goes without saying that the Ukraine faces a similar situation. The very entry to NATO, the short-term goal that the current Zelensky government pursued, would turn more and more difficult as the war goes on. Even if Ukraine successfully sustained the military defeat on tactical level. So the concept of reinvestment also applies to the United States, considering the impending economic crisis, especially in terms of petroleum crisis and the prospect of worldwide economic recession. This is indeed an irony, I believe, because to me, it seems that the United States suffers more than Russia does. A series of economic sanctions upon Russia appear to inflict more damage to the US economy rather than the Russian one. It appears the Biden administration does not know what to do and where to go. They lost direction, I think. They lost control of the situation. Indeed, this is a typical mode of reinvention, I believe. I can say the same thing here in Korea. In diplomatic terms, under the strong influence of the United States, as one of the allegedly traditional allies, staunch allies of the United States, Korea has been expecting to support the Ukraine. However, since the outbreak of the war, its actual stance has been very ambivalent, I think. While supporting the Ukraine with some non-lethal aid, military aid, Korea has never by no means expressed any commitment to any large-scale support of lethal military equipment like tanks. No. A policy that the new Korean government would not change, I expect. I don't think that this is a policy of careful and deliberate consideration by Korean policymakers. Rather, it is an unintentional and accidental choice, I think, because we also really do not decide what to do and where to go, needless to say, due to the question of North Korea. Considering the threat from Pyongyang totally antagonizing Russia in diplomatic terms is not an option in the Korean diplomatic agenda, because this will definitely make Russia move closer to North Korea, I believe. This ambivalent situation reflects the very mode of reinventing of the academic circles of the Korean Slavics. Unlike the Korean public opinion that wholeheartedly supports the Ukrainian side, the Korean Slavic scholarship do not voice unilateral opinion. Needless to say, most of the scholarship accuse Russia of initiating the war. But when it comes to the background of the war, the historical origins of the ongoing war, there are many different voices. Some scholars, especially political scientists, I know, echo the voice of John Mearsheimer while comparing it with the Cuban Missile Crisis a half-century ago. Some historians studying Ukrainian and Russian history, including myself, try to find some explanation regarding the war in the historical context, especially the Soviet legacy. I know my statement might sound very strong, but I have to say, I believe that when it comes to crisis itself, I mean not the war this year, but the crisis that happened 8 years ago in the year 2014, there is some accountability in the Ukrainian side as well. As a historian, I studied the organic nationalism of Ukraine, especially the OUN and the UPA. OUN, I mean, Organizacja Ukraińskich Nationalistów, and UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. Thus, I know very well the problematic history and trajectory of the Ukrainian nationalism in the first half of the 20th century. Needless to say, while the OUN is gone long time ago, but I still believe its legacy still remains strong, ironically, due to the legacy of the passport nationalism during the Soviet rule. Needless to say, I'm not saying that Putin's justification of war had so many grounds. Indeed, I believe there is no Nazis in the contemporary time. But the ghost of OUN, the organic nationalists, still hangs around the Ukrainian territory, especially in the western part of Ukraine, Halichina, in English, Galicia, as a form of ethnic nationalism, which defines the Ukrainian identity in purely ethnic terms rather than civic terms. I believe this is a fundamental parallel in the contemporary Ukrainian idea of nation building, and this fundamentally accounts for the crisis. Thus, personally, I face Ringbanden myself as well, or my colleagues in Korean academic circles who are studying Russian and Ukrainian history. In terms of war that began this year, I support Ukraine. Russia initiated the invasion, and Ukraine is the victim. On the other hand, in terms of the crisis that began about 8 years ago, I see main responsibility in the Ukrainian side. I believe this ambivalent nature of the crisis made Korea's understanding of the war more complicated. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Kru. It's such a pity that I'm meeting you for the first time. Your presentation was very, very interesting. First of all, I'm not a Slavist, so hearing from someone who does Ukrainian history, it was very refreshing, and hearing from you about the sort of the problematic situation that South Korea is in with the the war in Ukraine vis-a-vis the relationship with North Korea was fascinating. I really enjoyed your presentation, and especially I think we have a couple of Slavists here, like Professor Chida. Dr. Chida is also a Slavist, and I think he can relate to your sort of sentiment about being a Slavist in Korea, and I think a lot of Japanese Slavists also are facing the same problem within academia of criticizing Russia about the war, but at the same time, that's what you study, right? That's what you've been studying for a long time, and it's difficult to sort of separate that, isn't it? And I appreciate that you mentioned that. Thank you so much. Okay, I will then. I'm the last speaker of the panel today. I'll try to keep it short so that we'll have at least some time at the end to open the floor up for Q&A. So as I said, I'm going to be presenting a little bit about the human security issue in this war in Ukraine, and I'm going to be talking primarily about the refugees here in Japan. Now, as I just mentioned earlier at the beginning, my academic background comes from political science. I'm a political scientist by training, and my research interest, actually, my research area is in East Asia. As I said, I'm not a Slavist. I work on gender and migration and human security issues, and that's why I'm going to be focusing primarily on the refugee issues here in Japan. And I'll also note some of my preliminary observations. Now, sorry, it's very, very difficult to read because the chart is, the numbers are very small, but I just wanted to give you just a taste of what it's like to be applying for refugee status here in Japan. Now, the numbers for 2020, so almost 4,000 people had applied for refugee status, but only 46 people were granted the refugee status. Now, I just looked at the numbers this morning for 2021, last year. They had about 2,413 applications and 65 were granted. Now, if you look at the numbers for the objections, so in 2020, they had about 2,500 objections, of which only one got accepted. For 2021, there was 4,046 objections, so people reapplied, and only 9 got granted refugee status. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's very, very difficult to get refugee status here in Japan. Now, one of the reasons why it's difficult to get refugee status here in Japan is the definition. Now, the Japanese government goes by the definition that was posed by the convention in 1951 and also the protocol from 1967. So, as defined in the provisions of the convention and the protocol, a refugee is a person who, owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside the country of his or her nationality and is unable or owing to such fear is unwilling to avail himself or herself of the protection of that country. Now, basically, the Japanese government goes by this definition. You have to prove that your life is in danger and that if you return to that country of your nationality, that you will be killed. And in Japan, it's the Ministry of Justice that determines whether a foreign national comes under the status of the refugee. The refugee recognition system in Japan is as follows. So you can be an illegal, I don't like to use the word illegal, this is from the Japanese website, hence that's why it says the word illegal. We like to use undocumented, but the undocumented residents and the documented residents, once they come to Japan, they can apply for recognition of refugee status. Now, if you are documented, obviously you apply and then there's a judgment of eligibility for refugee status. If you're undocumented, you can, first of all, you will be detained. Yeah, in some cases you will be detained, but you can also be refused to stay provisionally. Or in cases where there's a humanitarian concern, then the Japanese government will give the individual permission to stay. Now, once you go through the judgment of eligibility, then either you get recognized or you get refused. Now, if you get recognized, that's when you're able to get long-term residency and you can get support from the Japanese government. If you're judged that no, you actually don't apply as a refugee in Japan, you can, of course, file for objection, which many people do, as I just showed you in the chart a few slides ago. If you're refused, but there is consideration for humanitarian grounds, the Japanese government also does issue humanitarian status holding for these people. But if that individual does not seem that, if the individual isn't subject for consideration of humanitarian grounds, then you can be deported. Now that's how the recognition system works. But just to let you know, because of the rise or the increase in the application in Japan, it takes at least 2 to 3 years, sometimes even more than that, to get the judgment from the government or from the Ministry of Justice. So then, what do the refugees do while they're waiting for the official response from the government? After you stay in Japan for 6 months, you have a permission to work. But there are all sorts of restrictions on type of work you can do or how many hours you can work. So it is a very difficult situation for these people who are waiting for the judgment by the Ministry of Justice. Now, I just want to go through the terminologies in Japan and what the Ukrainians are called here in Japan. So, nanmin in Japanese refers to refugees in general. Now, jindoteki hobo, that is the word for humanitarian protection or humanitarian status holders. The word that they use for the Ukrainian refugees that come to Japan is the word hinanmi, which literally translates into evacuees. I think eventually this word probably will translates into the word evacuees, but I think eventually this word will start to mean asylum seekers. We don't have a proper word for asylum seekers in Japan, but these are the words that we use in terms of refugees that come to Japan. As I said, the Ukrainians that are coming to Japan are called hinanmi, or which refers to them as evacuees. Now, the support for the Ukrainian refugees are as follows. They come to Japan when at entry to Japan, they're given a short-term temporary visa for 90 days. And then once that 90 days is over, then they are given the designated activities visa, which is for 1 year, and they are allowed to work. And if they decide to stay longer, that's what they're considering right now is what type of visa they're going to be issuing once they finish that 1 year. Now, as of June 18th, which was a few days ago, 1,000 and about 300 Ukrainians are now here. They have entered Japan. Those who have family or relatives, they live with their family, or they live temporarily with their family or relatives. But those who don't live with their family or relatives in Japan, they're given temporary accommodations in hotels. And they're given up to 2,900 yen, approximately about $35 US daily allowance. Once they leave the hotel, once they find a house or once they find a home, they're given a one-time allowance of about 160,000 Japanese yen, which is approximately about 2,000 US dollars. And that's given to them as a one-time allowance. They're provided with some medical services, and they're also provided with some language education that's provided by the government, but this is very minimal. Most of the support comes from the private funding by NGOs and NPOs. Now, I'd like to give you just a couple of examples of the type of support the Ukrainians are receiving now. So there's an NGO that is called the Japan Association of Refugees, and they are supporting the Ukrainians with basic livelihood, helping them find a house, also obtaining jobs, etc. And there's also another group called the Japanese Supports for Ukrainian Students, and it's actually comprised of 100 language schools, Japanese language schools, and it provides free Japanese language classes, and it also raises money to help offset some of the expenses and travel costs of the Ukrainian refugees. This is a quotation by one of the principal at this language school that is providing the free language classes, and quote unquote, he says, "I don't really think that this will be a turning point. The extraordinary support that we're seeing in Japan in terms of refugees is because it was Ukraine. I find it hard to imagine that there will be the same kind of outpouring of support if another tragedy unfolds overseas." This is his response to a question by the reporter asking whether he thinks that this is a turning point for Japan's acceptance of refugees. So basically what he's trying to say is that he doesn't think that this is actually a turning point, that the reason why they see a lot of support for the Ukrainian is because of where they're coming from, because they're from Ukraine. Now, I'd like to illustrate the differences between the Ukrainian refugees and the other types of refugees we have in Japan. Now, we have refugees from Myanmar, and these people have fled Myanmar due to the military junta. And when they come to Japan, they come on temporary, again, the same sort of pattern you see with the Myanmar people as well. They come on a temporary visa, then they change it to a designated activities visa. But in many cases, they're only given 6 months, and they're limited to 28 hours of work per week. Sometimes they're given a 1 year a visa, which of course they're able to work for however long. But that's the status that they're given. And the people that have fled Myanmar to Japan, these people are accepted on the Japanese policy of emergency evacuation measures for people of Myanmar in light of the situation in Myanmar. So they are not considered to be refugees. And people that have fled Afghanistan, now they have to apply for regular type of visa, such as student visa, or there's another visa called Engineer Specialist in Humanities International Business. So once they come to Japan on temporary visa, they have to find ways to apply for regular types of visa. Or they can change it also to designated activities for 1 year, which allows them to work. And they're also accepted to Japan, not under the Refugee Act, but a special measure for people from Afghanistan. So what I'm trying to get to is that the differences in the acceptance of the refugees from Ukraine and the refugees from, say, people from Myanmar and Afghanistan are people have criticized the discrepancy because it seems that there is more willingness to accept the evacuees or refugees from Ukraine, but not from those from Myanmar or Afghanistan. Now, I'm going to finish in about 2 minutes. The preliminary observations that I have is that, of course, all national policies can be said to have theology, which is not merely an objective that the policy itself is supposed to achieve, but an outcome that defines and shapes a nation state. When I say nation state, I'm using it in the sense of Andrew Haywood, a political organization and a political ideal. Now, in case of immigration policies or refugee policies, the factor being defined is the ideal form of a nation state. In particular, its demographic, culture, and social structure. So in this light, Japan's immigration policy, including its refugee policy stands as an ideal example of what can be called a utilitarian functional type of policy. Now, what I mean by that is that in Japan, I wouldn't say the Japanese people per se, but the Japanese government itself, the Japanese government views foreignness through an overwhelmingly economic lens. And it treats migrants as interchangeable tools to be organized and ranked and utilized in light of their perceived usefulness to Japanese society. So refugees, in this scheme of things, are highly likely to be perceived as negatives rather than being type group of people to be actively accepted into Japan. The Japanese government is now currently trying to politically maneuver the revision to its Immigration and Refugee Act using the Ukrainian refugee as their raison d'etat. Now, this is my the last statement for the day. Of course, that shouldn't be the case. Refugees, asylum seekers, evacuees must be protected because they are in danger. Their lives are at stake, their human rights are at stake. They should not be used as political tools to seek other political means. We'll have to see what happens with the Ukrainian evacuees. They've only been coming since the last couple of months. We'll see what kind of turn of events we'll see, but those are just some of my preliminary observations to this phenomenon. So with that, I will finish. Great. Thank you everyone for your presentations, and thank you to the audience that are here. We do have about 10 minutes left for Q&A. If I could ask all these speakers to turn their camera on, and if you have questions for each other, that's great. I would also like to invite the audience. We have a few here. If you have any questions to the speakers, you can either write your question on chat, or you can ask us, just if you can unmute, we're not a big group, so if you can unmute yourself and ask the question to the speakers, that would be great. So, anybody have any questions for the speakers? And also for our speakers here, if you have any questions to each other, that would be great as well.
Good day, colleagues. My name is Ekaterina Nechanova. And I'm from Russia, really, from the Institute of Russian History. And thank you very much for your presentations. I was really interested in your view of this war and your consideration of this dreadful situation we have here. And really, I have a lot of questions, but maybe I can, start with the first presentation with the question for Dr. Chida. Thank you very much. And we have a lot of news here since the presentation of the Kazakhstan president of Kassym-Jomart Tokayev at Petersburg Economic Forum, International Economic Forum, when he rejected to recognize Donetsk and Lugansk as the independent states. Yes, he named it a quasi-state. Yes, and now a lot of Russian independent media discuss the situation in Kazakhstan and possible rising of nationalism in the Central Asia. Similarly, the war in Ukraine and Putin's attitude to the Ukraine and Ukrainian people maybe causes the problem, especially in Kazakhstan, with the problem of northern Kazakhstan, yes, and we had a lot of Russian population there. So, could you tell your view on this possibility? So, is it really some traces of this raising nationalism and the fear of Russia in the Central Asian societies? It's not only the government. Oh, thank you.
Can I answer?
Please.
Okay, thank you very much for a very important question. Yes. Actually, I think that some sort of, Kazakh nationalism are actually, I think, rising due to the Ukrainian war in Kazakhstan. But it is, of course, it's, when Russian politicians say something quite, then of course Kazakhs react quite negatively. But at the same time, I think that the public opinion among Kazakhs are also divided, I think. Not 50-50, but 30-70, I don't know, 40-60, I don't know, but certain percentage of Kazakhs are supporting Russia's position, and 30% do not. So, and what is important is among Kazakhstani Russians, opinions are also divided. I think so. Some support Russian position, some are against. So, the position of the Kazakhstani people are not monolithic, I think, quite divided. And of course, if Russian, some sort of nationalistic politicians continues to demand something, territory or something, I don't know, from Kazakhstan, then the nationalism inside Kazakhstan will rise up. But it is still early to say some possibility to have some conflict or confrontation between two nations or two countries. I think still how to say yes. I don't know. I cannot say anything about the how to say about the future, but currently how to say not so quite how to say I'm likely to have some confrontation with some interesting conflicts will occur in country. This is my opinion. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Katya, for a great question. We might have maybe time for one more question if anybody has one. If no one has a question, then if I could take the liberty of asking a question as a chair of this panel, I would like to ask both Professor Son and Professor Ku what they think of the future, I know you're not fortune tellers, but what both of you think of how the relationship between South and North Korea will pan out, and what the impact of this war will be. Who knows when the war is going to end, but if the war prolongs, what do you think would be the impact on South Korea and South Korea's relations with North Korea and Russia?
Let me go first. As I talked presenting my argument, the Ukraine situation has we can say that it has an effect, but it only remote, very remote effect and very indirect effect. So the Korean security policy is largely determined by inter-Korean relationship, U.S.-China Sino-American relationship, and Korean Japanese relationship, etc. So that's major factors in the inter-Korean relationship. But coincidentally, Ukrainians were welcomed at least these complex interactions between countries, etc. So what happens there only will only have some ramifications, some ripple effect, which puts some more emphasis on the policy positions of this administration if this administration thinks it reinforces their position. That's the limit, and that's the worst implications can go, I think.
Great, thank you, Professor. Next, Professor Ku.
Okay, I'm not fortune teller, I'm not political scientist, I'm a historian. As a historian, I'm very hesitant, in expecting some kind of situation. You usually evaluate like expected, but just what can I say? My opinion is like my expectation is like this. Korea and Russia has kind of relationship, friendly relationship in terms of a few days ago we launched a kind of missile. Actually, it was made through the Russian aid, and the NATO missile is actually made by Russian technology. And we have a long history of mutual, aid and cooperation in terms of military terms. So I don't think Korean government will wholeheartedly support U.S. position in this case. And in terms of North Korean question, as far as I know, Russia has never sincerely helped North Korea after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So they are probably just pretending, to support North Korean regime, but I don't think they were sincere in helping North Korea. I don't want we should not disrupt this kind of relationship. So I cannot expect that Korean government will be very careful and in maintaining the relationship between Korea and Russian government. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I have one last question. We started a little late, so if I may take a minute or two, ask a question to my colleague, Dr. Kato. Thank you for giving us sort of an overview of East Asia and Asia in general. I wonder if you could maybe respond to my question regarding the China factor. If and when China and Russia, I mean, they have a very interesting relations, I think, in these times of war. What do you think would be? What do you think will happen with the issue of Taiwan in light of this war and in light of this sort of very interesting relations between the two countries? Thank you.
Taiwan. Okay. Yeah, it's very difficult to talk about Taiwan because I think after the Ukraine war broke out, the Xi Jinping administration seems to be more careful about Taiwan, and this is not a direct answer to your question, but I think the serious Asian implication of the Ukraine war is firstly, the potential of full-scale war has rapidly increased, and this has heightened the threat of Taiwan unification through the use of force by China. And secondly, this heightened military threat has prompted neighboring countries of Russia and China, including Japan and North Korea, to expand their military forces. So, for example, North Korea has increased the number of missile launches, and in Japan, the upper house election is scheduled in July 10th. Currently, not only candidates of Liberal Democratic Party, but also opposition parties are advocating increase of defense spending. So I think I'm really concerned that neighboring countries lapse into a security dilemma, and the regional security environment will deteriorate. Sorry, this is not direct answer.
No, that's perfect. That's great. I just wanted to hear your opinion, so that's great. Thank you very much, everyone. First of all, thank you to the speakers for being here at a very busy time in their respective semesters in Korea and Japan. Thank you to the audience for being here, and apologies for starting a little late, but I think the important thing is that we're all here and that we are able to finish this panel. Thank you to RCCZ for having us, and I hope that we can continue this discussion on a very, very important subject that is affecting us all over the world. So thank you to all the speakers once again. 감사합니다. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I ask the speakers to stay just a minute or two so I can take a photo? I'll take a screenshot. Okay. Okay, so if you could look at your camera for a couple of minutes, and I'll just take a couple of screenshots. Just a second, please. Where's my screenshot? There we go. One more. One more. If you could keep your eyes open for a minute or two, thank you. All right, I'll just do it one more time. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think I've taken it. All right, so I will send the photos to the people at RCCZ, and I hope that they will be able to send it to you. I'll send it to you, Chino-san and Kato-san. Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you very much. 교수님 더 감사합니다.
수고하셨어요. 고맙습니다.
또 뵙겠습니다.
네, 고생하셨습니다.
너무.
감사합니다.